Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is David Pevsner, a writer and actor who's written songs for Naked Boys Singing off Broadway and appeared on Criminal Minds, Modern Family, and Grey's Anatomy, among dozens of other shows. He's also become an activist speaking out against ageism and body shaming, and he writes about that journey in his new book, Damn Shame, a Memoir of Desire, Defiance and Show Tunes. I interviewed David for Zoomer magazine last fall, and now that Damn Shame is here, I thought it'd be a good time to get him on the podcast. David picked 16 Candles, John Hughes' 1984 directorial debut, and a film that codified teen comedy for an entire generation. It's the one where Molly Ringwald plays Sam, an average teenager in the Chicago exurbs dealing with crushes, alienation, popularity, and the fact that her parents forgot her birthday in the rush to her sister's wedding. It's also the one where Anthony Michael Hall plays a geeky kid named Farmer Ted, and the one where Gete Watanabe plays Long Duck Dong, a character who's basically one step above Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's as far as Asian representation goes. Almost 40 years later, there's a lot about 16 Candles that doesn't hold up. But there's some stuff that does. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Why 16 Candles? Originally, I was going about What's Up, Doc, which I think is like the funniest movie ever made, but you did that already.
Yeah, last year.
There were a couple others I looked at, but then what really came into my head was 16 Candles because a few things. One, it was shot in my high school. Oh. After my high school closed in 1980, they took it over in 1984 to do this movie. So it's the first time I ever saw someplace that my own legs had been on a movie screen.
Yeah.
Secondly, I had gone to college with a woman named Deborah Pollack, and she plays Long Duck Dong's girlfriend in this movie. Okay. And it was the first time I had ever seen someone I know in a speaking part in a film. And that was kind of neat. But then, look, I have always been, and I always will be, a teenage girl about love. And there's so much memorable stuff in the film, but those last couple of scenes where the cars pull out and there's Michael Scheffling, perfect Michael Scheffling waiting for Molly Ringwald. And then they go and they sit on a table over a birthday cake and kiss. Come on. When that movie came out, I was 25, I think. 25 or 26. Mm-hmm. And it just went down to my little gay heart, It really did. I think it's kind of in a way, even through all the craziness and the kookiness and the stuff that I recently discovered is not so good about the movie, which we'll talk about.
Sure.
It's still a romp. It's still really funny. It has, I think, one of the great comic performances of all time by Anthony Michael Hall as the geek. It's a brilliant performance. And it's as a romance, it's certain things don't stand the test of time, but overall the feeling of the film and the romance of the film and the insecurity of, the teenagers and everything, all of that feels very timeless to me.
Yeah, it's the very definition of a problematic fave, the whole John Hughes oeuvre. Because I was that age when it came out. I was 16 in 84, and these were the films that communicated myself back to myself, or at least the world that I wanted to live in back to myself. Yeah. And then you turn around, maybe even 20 years later, I guess it would have been, not even then, right? Because Fight Club was 99, and people made the argument then that it was a Cameron and Ferris reversal, and that you could apply the Ferris Bueller is the Tyler Durden of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Cameron is the Edward Norton, and you start thinking, oh, that's very clever. Oh, but that means Ferris is a terrible person. Oh, but he is a terrible person. And then you start unpacking all of those things. And that's before I ever revisited 16 Candles and realized just how
racist,
rapey, like there's
I was actually last night, and I had just watched it and was like, oh, I forgot about all that.
Yeah.
And I was texting with my cousin, and we were talking about 16 Candles. She said, oh, I want to show it. I love it. And I want to show it to my kid. But I until I can explain to him how racist and rapey it is, she said that exact thing. Yeah. She said, he's not ready for it yet. Because, in watching, because I literally watched it last night, it kind of reminds me, for me, the reason why now I'm really glad we're talking about it is because on the subject matter of like cancel culture and banning stuff, whatever, I'm not a fan of people is one thing. There are certain people who deserve to be canceled.
Sure.
But when you're talking about art and media and stuff, very often to cancel something, to ban something is kind of missing the possibility of a teachable moment where you can still watch something, still enjoy something, but then also say, but hey, that part of the movie, we don't do that anymore. And kind of talk about it that way. You can still, I still watched it. I still enjoyed it. I laughed. I cried a little bit. But those moments, every time they say long duck dong and there's a gong sound.
Yep.
Oh my God. It's like, I understand why it was funny back then, but now you just kind of go, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, that's what's so fascinating about it now, about all the Hughes output from the 80s, is that it is so locked into what I can only call like the dominant entertainment perspective, where everybody went to see this. And this is what entertainment was. This is what high school comedies were. I mean, he kind of invented this version of them, but Amy Heckerling and Cameron Crowe had already made Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The precedent was there for an R-rated adult version of the story. And then this came along and commercialized it and commodified it and made it, like soundtracked it and made it a thing into itself, a specific subgenre. But it's a white guy's version, and it's an older white guy's version already. He's kind of applying the prejudices of the 70s that he was used to the mid 80s, and it carried forward because these films were hits and they got into everything. And then you turn around and you realize that he's not 5 years, 6 years away from making things like Home Alone and Baby's Day Out, where the whole thing starts to become, I mean, he was also apparently really big on the coke. And that would clarify a lot of the weird class stuff that goes on in his later films, and how all of his scripts, Curly Sue as well, and things like that, they're all about how underclass people are trying to steal comfortable people's stuff. And it's paranoid and weird and unpleasant. And he just, like, people of color, racialized characters, they didn't exist to him except for the purpose of jokes, except to be mined for jokes, or even
like Long Duck Dong.
Long Duck Dong, and Ferris Bueller has the two carjack guys, the valets who steal the car and run around with it, and they're not white. They're less than in Hughes's eyes, and it's a struggle every time to reconcile the fact that some of this, like, the storytelling is really strong, the visual sensibility is good, the direction is great,
the soundtracks are great.
He knows how to program a soundtrack, and he gets good performances out of his actors, but it's still like a battle for me to try to decide, like, well, was this a blind spot for him, or did he really not care?
Well, look, I mean, like I said, it was filmed in my high school.
Yeah,
we didn't have any African-American people in my high school. Okay. I didn't have a lot of, there were, Latinos and Latinas, and, there was a little bit kind of sprinkled through, but it was very white and very middle class. And so watching that movie back then, I was kind of like, oh, there's nothing, I don't see anything, well, we didn't know that back then anyway. Like you said,
no, that's what
they were handing us. That's what they were dishing to us. And we kind of accepted it and never questioned it. But what's so funny is now when you watch a film and there's such an opportunity to show the diversity of artists and actors and whatever, and you kind of go like, wow, this is so not like what I was raised with,
Yeah.
Especially the more kind of the lightweight kind of rom-com-y things that I used to love to watch. It was all white all the time.
Yeah, well, white and straight too. I mean, Hughes's films did not acknowledge, unless I'm missing something, the closest it comes to acknowledging the existence of gay people is the homophobic stuff in Breakfast Club and Weird Science. Mm-hmm. And I suppose at the time, even in your mid-20s, that's still the reality that you're seeing in entertainment culture. There wasn't a lot of acknowledgement of
Well, in this, at one point, Anthony Michael Hall calls his two geeky friends. He goes, fags. He calls them fags. Don't be
right.
fags or something like that.
Yeah.
And I have to say, kind of like watching, and they're the things that are, but that really caught my ear because I don't remember that.
Okay.
And as a little fag boy, you would think that would be something I would really remember. I didn't remember that at all. So that, and it's possible I even saw a version that maybe like bleeped it out or something. But I mean, I saw it in the movie theaters as far as I can remember. But that really caught my attention. And, certainly kids still call each other fags now. That hasn't changed. But in the movies, we can't do that anymore unless it's, it's part of something. They can't just throw it out like that, but if you're in a Scorsese film and you're trying to be realistic and stuff, I don't really think he's going to care so much if about the political correctness of that.
Yeah, well, especially if you characterize it as being inappropriate within the film, you can get away with it. I mean, the closest I can come to is the moment in Bill and Ted, the first Bill and Ted film, where they haven't seen each. Oh, it's really good.
I've never seen it.
It's smart and sweet, and we just watched it again last year in prep for the sequel. And there's a moment where Bill and Ted are delighted to find out that they're both alive. They haven't seen each other in 10 minutes, and they think each thinks the other has fallen off a cliff or something. And they see each other and they embrace, and then they immediately step back and just go fag. But it's somehow sweet because these characters have no hostility to them.
Yeah.
And it's just the only way they know how to reconcile the fact that they truly love each other is to push it away that way. But the moment makes it clear that the film knows, if nothing else, that these characters are using it in.
But again, a teachable moment.
Yeah.
For people watching the movie, it's not like, oh well, they say fag, so we need to like never show it again. Right. I mean, there are certain things like the Bill Cosby show that we never need to see again because that's not even 7 years worth of that man. Don't get me started. I never thought he was funny, but no, I never did. There was always something about him that really bothered me. And sure enough, but I think it's worth teaching about, celebrity or something like that. But, and I guess, I don't know, maybe they shouldn't cancel the show. Maybe, cause all the other actors, are terrific in it.
It's a real problem, right? Like
it's a real issue. It is
the significance of a project that is thus destroyed by one person. It really, it bugs me that I can't watch Annie Hall anymore because Diane Keaton's so good in that.
She is so good in it.
Yeah. And the film captures something about neurosis that I think is actually valuable. Seeing yourself on screen in any way is somehow, but then, I also don't want Woody Allen representing me in any way.
Yeah.
And then all the other people who've worked with him and won Oscars or not won Oscars, but still given great performances, all that stuff gets put into a box with an asterisk on it. And that's unfortunate. And to that extent, I mean, Molly Ringwald has said that she was really unhappy about a lot of,
I read what she wrote.
She's written very movingly about it, but the performance is great. She is trying and doing.
She's great in the movie. There is nobody in that movie that is not good. It's really, you have those great character actors like Billy Bird and Edward Andrews and Carol Cook, Max Showalter playing the grandparents, Carlin Glynn, Paul Dooley, Blanche Baker as her sister. It is such a funny deadpan performance. Like, in fact, I remember that performance going, that girl is doing absolutely nothing and she's hilarious. It's just these like goofballs knocking off against each other. And again, Anthony Michael Hall, I'll say it, and I said it before, it is one of the great comic performances of our time. He just milks the crap out of it.
Oh yeah.
And so there's a lot to enjoy in that film. Some of the stuff is very, very funny. The writing can be very funny. The situations, the music, the sound effects. Like they add these weirdo sound effects to certain things that just kind of, you kind of half hear it, but it makes you laugh. Mm-hmm. If only, and Getty Watanabe is a wonderful actor and a really, really sweet guy. And, he's good in the movie, except it shouldn't have been that.
Yeah.
But he was very good. And he and Debbie, my friend Debbie, have that very kind of fun, sweet thing going on between the two of them. And Yeah, it is one of those things you can be a little conflicted about
Yeah.
liking something when you know there's something really wrong with it.
Yeah. And it is that thing too of what, when you're talking about Watanabe, he's giving exactly the performance he was directed to give, and he's
Yep,
doing it well. He fully
really well.
commits. There's no self-consciousness. The slightest bit of humanity, horribly enough, would ruin it. The same way that Ted is completely unaware of who he is, right? Like
Well,
he sort
there's
of
the
owns it at the very end, but
plus there's this over the top quality that is there, but it's really couched in reality, you know. And Haviland Morris, who plays Carolyn, the kind of cute but bitchy girlfriend.
Mhm.
I was a reader for auditions in New York sometimes, and Haviland Morris came into audition, and I loved the movie so much. And she came in to sit down, and the casting director had to leave, so it was just her and I sitting in the room. And she kind of was like, you know, looking at her pages and stuff, and I just said, okay, I'm just going to say this right now. I said, you are so good in 16 Candles. It's one of my favorite movies. And she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. Well, this gives me a little confidence today. She was really, really sweet. And it was really fun to meet her because she really is. Everybody in that movie, I think, is fantastic. Joan Cusack in the non-speaking geeky girl thing with the retainer thing on. Oh, it's just so silly, but it's really fun.
yeah, it's, again, like I want to praise it for what it does do right, which is capture
Exactly.
the insecurity and the sheer teenagehood of it. Like there
angst.
there weren't a lot of movies that let teenagers get angry, right? I mean, other than the stuff in the 50s, like Wild in the Streets or The Wild One, where it was it was people in their 20s playing kids, and it was already a cliche somehow because the juvenile delinquent was such an overplayed thing. These are just regular. I mean, they're reasonably well-to-do kids because that's John Hughes's world. Nothing is shabby in his world because he's creating a fantasia of adolescence, but they're allowed to be pissed off at circumstance and powerlessness. And it really comes into its own in The Breakfast Club, where it's all about that.
That's a great movie.
Yeah,
it really is.
But it's rumbling under the surface here in so many ways. And just the fact
it's covered over by comedy. But the thing about it is that she really was a great every person in this movie, when it comes to being a teen. Yeah, she was great because she was really understated. She was the most real of everybody for sure. And there's just something about watching this, not only the teenage angst, but the whole world's going to fall apart if he doesn't love me type thing. And just her struggle. I just thought it was so sweet and something that we all, when we had our crushes and our first love. And in fact, there's a great line that Paul Dooley says. He says, that's why they call it a crush. If it didn't hurt so much, they would call it something else or something like that. Yeah. There's some real wisdom in there about, the adolescent love and I don't know. I know I'm not supposed to, I don't know if this is the politically correct film to love, but I still do.
You're allowed. Everybody bonds with things when they see them.
Yeah.
If it's that special. And this isn't the first time there's been a difficult shadow over the film. Although in this case, I think it's one of those things where every time someone picks a Polanski film, we have to deal with why, right? But this isn't that. Like, it's just, it's so much a product of its time. And I think more than any of Hughes's other films, it's the one where I think it's just because it was his directorial debut, he felt he had to pander hardest into that stuff. And so he tried to make the most commercial, most saleable story he could. And that involved being really shitty to a lot of people within the world of the movie. Not the way he treated his actors, but the way he characterizes people and the way he presents things.
But the thing about it too, is that it has a very strong premise for a film.
Mm-hmm.
When you're that, you're 16 and everything is like, working against you and your family forgets your birthday. I think that's a really great concept for a film because your birthday is everything, especially your 16th birthday. And you've got the brother, the Justin Henry brother, who's just such a little asswipe, and the parents who are just oblivious. because they've got this other daughter getting married, and everybody's putting their attention into that. And the guy she's married and their family are just like idiots. And it's really like,
Yeah.
There's just really so much to enjoy in this film, and so much to kind of sweetly identify with, I think.
And putting it on Ringwald's shoulders
Smart move.
gives us the chance to watch her become a movie star too, in a way that might not have happened with someone more familiar to the audience. I mean, I have a colleague, I interviewed Ringwald in 97.
Oh, wow.
For Office Killer with Cindy Sherman, which was one of the weirdest situations I've ever been in, which is just like you're both incredibly representative of such specific different things from the 1980s. And here we are talking about a movie you made in the same room. Really just a fun, weird interview. But a colleague of mine who's maybe, I want to say 5 years younger than me, he begged me to let him tag along because Molly Ringwald was Molly Ringwald. He was, I guess he would have been 11 or 12 when he saw 16 Candles. And she was probably, we never really talked about it because I didn't want to embarrass him or really push too hard, but she was probably his first crush, really. Like it's the first screen crush. And he came with me and just sat in. He wrote for an arts magazine. So I was like, well, at least you can meet Cindy Sherman. That'll be something. And we sat in the interview and he could not look at Ringwald. It was adorable and weird, and just he couldn't ask him, he couldn't move when her attention was on him. And I'm relating to her as an actor who's done lots of stuff that I've seen, and that
she's an old pro and she knows how to handle all
absolutely. But that fundamental movie star thing for her, absolutely, unquestionably in my mind, goes to 16 Candles, and she owns that film. She shoulders it so beautifully and carries every emotional moment. And she's got such a wide open performance.
And she's so relatable. She's just like the most relatable, because she's also very simple in her work. And it's funny because if you've ever seen her on The Facts of Life, the first season of The Facts of Life, she's very, just like everybody on that show, which I loved. I love The Facts of Life, call me Teenage Girl, but everybody's very big and very sitcom-y. So compare her performance on that show with what she does in 16 Candles, and it's literally night and day. She's great. I mean, I just adore her.
Yeah,
I watch her on Riverdale now. She's a mom.
She's on Riverdale. I don't watch Riverdale.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I've heard that the joke of the show is that they cast all the teen idols as parents now, right?
Well, yeah, because they had her and then Luke Perry.
Luke Perry, of course.
And they had a very moving moment. And after Luke Perry passed away, they did kind of an episode that explains how he died on the show. And it had to do with him getting hit by a car when he was helping somebody change a tire or something. And the person that drove the car, I can't remember if it's the mother. Anyway, the mother was played by Shannon Doherty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we had a 90210 thing going, and she was great. It was very touching, to watch that kind of thing. And this is what TV does to us. We get very connected to these characters. And so when you have a film, when you have a character like that, like Molly Ringwald's character that kind of takes you with her and puts it out there, that's remarkable to me. And then unfortunately you get to the point at the end of the movie where we essentially find out that Anthony Michael Hall, date raped, not Anthony Michael Hall, that the geek date raped Carolyn. And you kind of go, oh, at the time you're like, oh, okay, well, they both got what they wanted. Did they? No, they didn't. No, you don't realize it. But now, boy.
Yeah.
Red flag.
It's a really weird wish fulfillment thing for the movie.
Rapey.
Yeah. Well, and just to think that is what audiences wanted, like to write it from the position that, well, this is going to work. This is what people will want. And it kind of was, because no one said anything at the time, right? Like you want it to work. You want it to pay off. And he's a hero.
He's one of the heroes of the film, and and it's a film about him wanting to succeed sexually. That's his whole thing.
It's his only goal.
It's this whole goal through the whole movie, to prove to that he's a man or whatever. But he gets it in the end, and you're kind of like, well, good for you, but not good for you, really.
Yeah.
But in the movie, it's like, okay, well, it happened, and everybody, and then she got what she wanted because she had a good time, apparently. Like, that's a really weird kind of turn of
but I can
turn
see
of plot there. But
I know I can see Hughes thinking, well, if the joke is that Ted is really good at sex, then that solves everything.
Exactly.
But it really just doesn't.
It really just
no. I have to say, I discovered years ago that Jim Carrey was up for the part. Back when he was basically doing stand-up comedy in Canada. He hadn't done any film at all or television in 1983 or 4 when this would have been cast. And he was up for it and apparently played it as a stereotypical Jerry Lewis nutty professor nerd, which you can't do. Like, Ted only works if he's a person who doesn't have social skills. If he's a cartoon, the same way, like if he's as broad as Long Duck Dong, you can't sell that character becomes monstrous and annoying. But Hughes said that Hall was the actor who just showed up and performed the role without doing any mannerisms, and his lack of effect was the thing that the character needed.
And some of his choices, like, you don't know where that came from. There's one moment where he's talking to Michael Scheffling about Samantha, about the Ringwald character, and the house has just been trashed because there was a party, and so this is the after of the party and so he makes martinis for he and Michael Scheffling, hands them off, and then takes a cocktail napkin as he's talking, just kind of hands it to Michael Scheffling, and Michael Scheffling kind of takes it and throws it away. And it was just so like, who thought of that, to pick up a cocktail napkin and hand it over at this house that's been destroyed? That's just, it's little things like, he does tons of little things like that are just, I don't know, I clever.
Yeah. And well, because that's what grownups do, right? Like, so much of his behavior is mimicry of something a mature person does. But he never comes out and says it. It's never called out. It's just there. And it really, it makes him so much more interesting, because what was it, like, the greatest thing you can do as an actor is have a secret. And his secret, I think Ted's secret, is that he just doesn't know what he's doing, and he's only doing things he's seen other people do. But it makes him the most interesting person in the frame.
Yeah. And technically he can go big, he can be big as day, but he also can pull it back. And, even like a moment when there's that whole thing where she's drunk in the car, and the Jake character, she goes like, who's this? Who's he? And pointing to Anthony Michael Hall, and Michael Scheffling goes, that's me. Then she points at Jake, and she goes, well, who's he? Well, that's him. Oh, okay. And Anthony Michael Hall just sits there and goes, with a little bracy smile. Tiny, but really funny. Yeah. It's one of, I if I ever get to meet that guy, I'm going to tell him that I do think it's a pretty goddamn funny performance.
It's a great performance. And against someone like Scheffling, who he's not bad, but
he reminds me of the jocks that I went to high school with, kind of closed off, like, but he was just so beautiful.
Yeah. And he's only there for that, right? For the purposes of the film, which mostly sticks with Sam's point of view, Jake Ryan has to be unattainable and distant and
exactly.
And like, I always think of Troy Donahue, like somebody who just looks the part, but you never really want to talk to him.
Well, also at the end, after they get together, it's really sweet. And then you walk out of the movie theater and you go, but it's not going to last. He's going to go off to college, and she's going to start junior year, and she will have had a wonderful summer or whatever, but then it's done. It's not going to, unless, who knows, We'll never know. Michael Scheffling, is out in the world somewhere. He's like a furniture designer or something.
Just possible there. Like, the possibilities still exist.
And Molly Ringwald and Michael Scheffling will one day get together.
I mean, you have to hope in your heart of hearts that everything's going to be fine for everybody in these movies, because they end on such a perfect cloud. But there's nothing wrong with a sequel that picks up and finds them. I mean, there is now, because Hughes is gone, and I don't know that anyone else could try to rebuild that. But you do want to know what they would be doing now. Maybe it's just because I've been watching Yellow Jackets, which is the 25-year flashback thing going on, and you just keep thinking, well, what would she be doing? Where does she grow into? Who does Sam become? And what did Jake do? And was there anything in that? And I think casting Scheffling, because the other casting thing that I found out is that Viggo Mortensen was up for Jake.
Really?
Yeah, in 1984. And 1984 Viggo Mortensen, I think, would have been fascinating, but he would have been too interesting.
Exactly. Jake needed to be kind of a cipher in a certain way, kind of a representative of every jock out there, But Michael Scheffling went on. He was in Longtime Companion.
Yep.
He played a gay man in Longtime Companion. You could tell this was a guy who maybe wasn't a natural actor, but really did what he needed to do, and didn't let his looks be the only thing. He obviously, had the craft to become what that was, but, he left the business not too long after that. I think I want to say he was in Vision Quest.
He was, yeah. And Mermaids, I think, was the last thing he did, because that was around the same time as Longtime Companion, right? Early 90s, 1990, 1991.
Was it?
I think so. Mermaids was definitely 1990. Longtime Companion was maybe a year later. Shot a year later, or shot at the same time.
That movie.
Because the American Playhouse thing.
But I saw it. I saw that movie at a screening in New York. Big screening. Craig Lucas was there and everything. Oh my God! After that movie, because I moved to New York in '82, right when it all started, and that audience, which was a lot of gay men, huge audience, that applause after that movie went on for I can't even tell you how long. Yeah, because we needed to see it. We needed to see kind of a hopeful ending that it kind of has in a way. It was so moving.
Yeah, it has this sort of imaginary reunion, or the dream reunion on the beach, right? And I saw that in a tiny screening room in Toronto with maybe 12 people, and I think one of them might have been gay.
Oh wow!
I think J. Scott who was openly gay, and the only film critic at the time who was openly gay, and who could have been in that studio, in that screening room. I don't think he was there. I think he'd already seen it. But just you work in the arts, and you obviously you can't not know what's been going on for the last 10 years. And I was in my mid-20s, early 20s in the early 90s, and it was just devastating then. But that was me on the outside, not actually having lived through it, and that especially not in New York. I can't even imagine what that would have felt like.
Well, I've mentioned this before on one of my interviews, but there's a documentary coming out called Ghost Lights, and it's about all of the New York theater people who we have lost to AIDS. Oh, wow. And what could have been if they were all still here. So I was interviewed about Howard Crabtree, who was the costume designer for the show I did called When Pigs Fly, a genius, an absolute genius. And that was his last show, and he died before we even opened. Oh, God. So I kind of tell a story about meeting him that's really, really kind of emotional when I think about it. But yeah, this documentary, they've been making it for a few years now. So hopefully it'll come out soon. I think it's like an 8-part thing for some network. I'm not sure. I would love to have more information about it.
I'll keep an eye out for it. That sounds really powerful.
Think about all the people we lost, so much talent, some really good eggs. When I worked in New York, they're just either from the show you're in or the show that person's in, somebody's gone, somebody's sick, somebody's out, somebody dies. It just was a lot.
Yeah. We're just, we're recording this the day after Ronnie Spector's death was announced. Yeah. And it's just like every day somebody, and it's not even COVID anymore. I thought it was initially, and it's just turned out to be age, where these people are in their 70s or 80s. Betty White, right. And that feels wrong, even though, to quote a Longtime Companion, nobody's stalking anybody now. It's just the sense that in the 80s, simply existing was enough. If you were a gay man, and it seemed like the concentration in New York, just because that's where the community was, right? That the most vocal and the most public. But I can't even imagine the hollowing out of a culture the way that the way it was then for you all.
it would, and I've said this before about, when I get asked about this, the stuff about AIDS in my book, it was a wonderful time in a certain respect to be in New York, because we, as with the specter of AIDS over us, we still had to live our lives. And for those of us who were new to New York and discovering our sexuality and going to the bars and, going to the bathhouses, whatever, we just had to be really careful about it. And we had to kind of be vocal for each other with ACT UP and all those, we had to take care of ourselves because nobody was really helping us. You had Dr. Fauci, and believe me, I remember that name from way back when, because he was there. But Ronald Reagan wasn't. Mayor Koch wasn't. Idiots, fuckers. I mean, really, you just think about how whenever anybody laughs anything off because it's not happening to them, it's just unconscionable. It just makes you so angry. And that's where all the anger came from.
And then, of course, to bring it weirdly back to 16 Candles, you look at that and there's no acknowledgement that gay people even exist in a movie like this, right? Like it's just there's a wall between that reality and John Hughes's world.
Absolutely. It's funny. I was watching it, and the only time I thought about gay people at all was when he said fags. Didn't even think about it. And Michael Scheffling, please take your clothes off. That kind of ran through that was my own little gay movie going on.
Sure. But and in a weird way, that's what Scheffling is there for.
Fantasy,
to be desired.
Yeah, she wants him, she can't have him. She thinks she can't have him. I want him, I can't have him, and I really can't have him. So let me see her do it. Yay.
Yeah, that's what romantic comedies are, right? They're the avatars of our own desires, but they're just, good for Billy Eichner, who's actually doing the gay rom-com, apparently, that he sold to Universal. They're shooting it now. And
Bros.
Two gay leads. Oh, I didn't know that. That's a good title.
I think it's called Bros. Yeah.
Nice. And
Single All the Way with Michael Urie was on Netflix.
The Netflix Christmas movie.
There was another one, the Christmas Fix Up, or was it with the one with Fran Drescher?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh, it's cute.
Yeah. And Happiest Season last year in 2020, right?
I loved Kristen Stewart in that. I don't really know her that much as an actress. I saw a couple of the Twilight things, and that was one thing. But
sure,
in that and in Spencer, did you see Spencer?
I did, yeah.
She's fantastic.
She's generally pretty good. The Twilight films made her famous, but she's made a point of not making more of them. Like
she makes
not staying in the genre and going off. Yeah. Even when she's making something like Underwater, which is just a deep sea disaster movie with a monster. She's doing stuff. Like she's bringing things to the role and making the part live in a way that it might not have otherwise. And I don't know how we get back to 16 Candles from here.
I know we kind of took a turn, but let's see. Yeah,
we don't have to. But yeah, it is.
I know how we get back to it.
Okay.
Because if we are going to talk about the book at all, my book is told through the lens of this guy who is a teenage girl who loves 16 Candles, loves that and still does. I've been watching, never did it before, but I have been watching all the all the Christmas movies.
Okay.
All the ones about the baker that comes, goes to the small town, and the guy that she went to high school with. I've seen about 10 of them this season before having never seen any of them. And I cry at every single one of them.
What's the attraction? Why this year?
Well, partly it's because it's right in front of my face when you turn on Netflix and there's 52 Christmas movies just staring you in the face, and you go, oh, that actor, I like that actor, or that sounds cute, or I need to turn my brain off, and so I'm going to go watch a Christmas movie. At the end, what's going to happen. There were a couple that it was just so badly, you could tell it was just bad writing, not interesting, whatever, that I turned off. But for the most part, I would sit there and I go, and they're not long. They're like, 90 minutes long. And I'm a romantic. So it's funny that with my book being as having the elements, the kind of erotic elements of it, but I'm still this idealistic, total romantic. And yet there's that other side of me that I felt really crappy about for a lot of my life, because I felt like I was dirty and shameful and whatever. And so that's part of my journey, was to kind of connect this little boy who used my pillow to, I used to kiss my pillow when I was a little boy, and it was always some TV star, to the person I am now, who I still sometimes will like cuddle up to my pillow and pretend it's, Matt Bomer or something like that. But there's just underneath, I think I've come full circle in that little romantic boy is still there, but everything else on top of it, I've now kind of taken ownership of. And that's really what the book is about. It's, being your authentic self, letting your erotic, fantasies and not feeling shame about your body and not feeling, especially if you're of a certain age, like me, admitting on your show that at 63 years old, I will still cuddle up to my pillow and pretend it's a TV star because, who cares? You judge me if you want. I don't care. It's, I fall asleep and I feel like I'm kind of spooning somebody. So
yeah, that doesn't seem entirely unreasonable, honestly. Just isn't. It's at this point in a pandemic too, as a form of therapy. Yes. It just feels like a good way to go to fall
I don't
asleep.
have a dog. I don't have a bird. I'm here. I've been here for, the last 2 years on my own pretty much. So, got to make my own fun, as we say.
Well, the final question on the podcast is always the same, which is there anything from 16 Candles that you have used in your own work? Borrowed, referenced, nodded? I mean, you've written songs. Were you ever tempted to work the Sam dilemma into one of them?
Well, that's such a good question. And I wish I had taken note of that while I was watching it yesterday. I know that movie so well in certain respects that there are certain lines that go through my head. Mm-hmm. Whenever I get a Tic Tac, I think about him pulling out that she thinks it's his penis on her leg, but it's a roll of like certs.
Yeah,
and he goes, "Fresh breath is a priority." And so anytime I take a Tic Tac, I think fresh breath is a priority. So there are. I think that there are certain things I can't even tell you any of them now, except for that one. That there are lines from that movie that absolutely do run through my head in life sometimes. Just like in Buffy, I will quote this, and I always realize I have to explain it. I'm such a Buffy. Were you a Buffy fan?
Yeah. I watched it top to bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, there's that great moment at the end of the third season after they blow up the high school and they've had this whole thing, whatever, and it's all done and they defeat the villain, and Giles, her watcher, is saying something and she's exhausted, and Giles is saying something like, well, it's quite a strange ideologue. Like he does this whole kind of wordy, flowery thing, and Buffy's like, fire bad, tree pretty. So anytime I'm in a situation where I'm like overwhelmed and somebody's like, well, what's wrong? I'm like, fire bad, tree pretty. That's all I can handle. So yeah, that has nothing to do with 16 Candles, but that still is a teenage TV show.
Yeah, but it's pop culture as a guide to life, which I absolutely understand.
Mm-hmm. Just trying to think if there's anything else. That is such a good question. Well, I'll tell you, I wrote a song called Fight the Urge, which is in Naked Boys Singing, and it's 3 teenage boys in the showers in high school trying not to get hard-ons. And it's based on my real experience. And so when I see them, like when they're in the gym, when they're doing those fake pull-ups, Michael Shefley, that was my gym. That was part of my hell.
Of course.
So I think about that, and I think about, those showers, which I don't think they show the girls' showers, but they don't show the boys. But those showers were the ones that I felt all of my embarrassment and shame in. Those and my grammar school ones. So yeah. So I wrote a song that kind of somewhat connects to what's there, but yeah.
And now they're captured for all time in that film.
And now I know that the minute we finish this, I'm going to go, oh, wait a second. There's that.
It happens. Anyway. It's fine. You can always send me a voice memo. We'll tack it on.
Okay, good. Thank you.
My thanks to David Pevsner, whose book Damn Shame, A Memoir of Desire, Defiance and Show Tunes is in bookstores now from Random House. Thanks also to Scott Sellers. He knows what he did. You can find David on Twitter at David Pevsner, all one word, and you can find 16 Candles in a really comprehensive Blu-ray special edition from Arrow Video. It's also streaming on Netflix and Crave in Canada and on Hulu in the US, and available to rent or buy on most VOD platforms. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com, where I host the Now What podcast every Friday, in addition to writing far too much about movies and television. And you can find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com because I finally got the DNS issues fixed. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you enjoy it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're there. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your booster when you can. I'll see you next time.